Welcome to the Caregiver Reality Show with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato, who bring you more than a combined 25 years of practical experience, helping thousands of family caregivers, helping them find solutions to the challenges and frustrations presented by this important responsibility. So if you are in the position of caring for a spouse or a parent, a loved one who is no longer able to care for themselves, or if you know someone who is, this hour will be worth the listening. Now, let's tune in to today's edition of Caregiver Reality with your hosts, David Levy and Paul Vadiato.
Good evening, South Florida, America, and the world. It's 5 o'clock on the East Coast, and this is the Caregiver Reality Hour. I'm your host, David Levy, along with my co-host, Paul Vadiato, and you're watching us on caregiverreality.com, WWNN1470.com, amp2.com, iHeartRadio, YouTube, wherever else we're heard, as well as listened to on, I'm trying to think what the other one is, unimportant. Anyway, those of you that are watching us tonight will notice that we're in a new setting. Our producer, Freddie, has decided to take us out of the radio station setting and move us into one that gives us a more ability to be able to set different kinds of settings, ambience, look and feel. And so we're trying it out right now. If you're listening to us, I'm sitting in a rocking chair. Paul's sitting on a green couch with our guest tonight, Timothy Raja, who is a doctor and has worked as a hospitalist. She's an internal medicine professional. And we will be speaking with her as our professional a little later on in the show. But right now, she's sitting on the other side of the couch from Paul, helping to keep the couch from flying away. In any event, it's been a busy week. We're adding some new things. We're taking away some things we didn't think were working so well. But we do start the show every week with Paul. How was your week in caregiving?
Well, good afternoon, David, and good afternoon to all of our listeners, and thank you for joining us again today. First, I'd like to begin by wishing my bride a happy birthday. Today is her birthday, and it was nice to celebrate it today. Week in caregiving. We had a number of good days, a number of not so good days. We did get out to celebrate the birthday in the form of a lunch. And we're going to be back to seeing her physician this coming Friday and dealing with what appears to be a reoccurring infection. How about Suzette?
Suzette's had another tough week. It's I know I sound like a broken record every week, but she's really having difficulty. We saw her orthopedic surgeon, and not only is her good knee giving her trouble, the one that she had operated on, mechanically it's working fine, but she's having a lot of discomfort, and the one that wasn't operated on is not working very well. So her walking is extremely limited. We've gone back to having her use a cane, and as a result, part of her fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue is kind of taking over, and she's had a lot of pain, and so as a way to avoid it, she's been doing a lot of sleeping, which doesn't help knees very much. But tomorrow she'll be at her rheumatologist. Hopefully he'll give her some shots in the knee, or the knee that wasn't operated on, and hopefully we'll get to the bottom of what's going on soon, because I just don't think she's ready for that second surgery. But the surgeon did order physical therapy for her, and we're going to try and start that next week, hopefully to build her up and get her ready for surgery sometime after the first of the year. So, wasn't a great week, but come to expect that after 15 years of doing this.
And I understand, David, you have some advice for people who stand on chairs when hanging banners. What's that all about?
Oh, well, in order to set this place up where we're sitting now, and those of you in the car can't see it, but we have banners from various shows, including ours, and so there is a brand new laminate floor and Freddie went out and bought the cheapest chairs he could find that were not non-skid. So I was standing on the chair trying to pull one of the canvas signs so that it was taut and straight, and all of a sudden the chair skidded out from under me, and thank God I was trained as a SEAL and a ranger, and I managed to fall correctly, even though at my tender age did I feel it the next day. But I had now decided the only one to get on a chair in the future is Freddie.
Thank you.
All right. So anyway, Freddie's got his thumb up in front of his face. And so we're doing things slightly differently today in this new setting, because normally we would have the lights for on the air and the camera set up, and we'd be seeing ourselves on the screen. But we're flying a little bit blind here, so those of you that are watching, please indulge us for the moment. But we're adding another piece to the show today, and it's called From My Personal Perspective. And Paul will be starting this feature off. We'll be doing it each week. And Paul, why don't you tell us what it is we're listening to your perspective about?
Yes, certainly. A number of people who are fans of the show have said, you know, I think it would be nice to hear what both of you have to comment on things of importance. And I put together a few of my observations that I'd like to share with you today. And again, this is my opinion. And it was from the post-election. First thing I'd like to comment on, I think the elderly, the frail, and the sick seem to have fallen by the wayside in the national debate. I didn't hear too much about new programs. Get a feeling there's going to be reduced help coming into the future. And unfortunately, it seems to me that a lot of them are just being ignored. I don't think that's the right thing to do. A lot of talk about Social Security, Medicare and Medicaid. Once upon a time, they were third rail issues. Now, for those of you who are familiar with subway systems, the third rail is the one that carried the electricity. And politicians would never speak about these programs because it would be political suicide. Well, that's not so much the truth anymore. It seems that change is coming, and not necessarily for the good. And it's going to be too late when benefits are either reduced or eliminated. And by the way, I've been paying FICA taxes to Social Security and Medicare ever since I started working at age 14. It is not a freebie. People put money into these programs. For those of you who watch Bill Maher last week on his show, he was saying that when people were polled on separate questions such as, do you want a national health care system, and many other quality of life regarding these type of issues, when they were polled, the people went out and said yes, that they would like to see these changes. But after saying that, they went and they voted for the exact candidates who were opposed to those changes. And repeating what he said on air, there's such a tremendous disconnect with what people want and the way that they vote. We also saw this week this question of assisted suicide coming back into the national conversation. And there seems to be a growing discussion regarding the right of people to decide their death with physician-assisted suicide under certain circumstances in terminal illnesses. And I think that's going to become part of the conversation going forward. Here in Florida, medical marijuana as a treatment option was defeated. More states seem to be approving it. It was close here in Florida, but it was defeated. And some of the post-polling said that they actually were in favor of it, but they did not like the way the amendment was worded. I think the use of those ads depicting caregivers as drug dealers, I think they were despicable, but apparently they did work. And in my opinion, they may have worked, but I think it was at a great cost to those who take care of other people. And lastly, my perspective on the turnout for this election, which I thought was extremely important, especially for our younger voters, was appalling. And I think we all have to do better in coming out to support the things that we believe. And that's how I see things. David?
Well, Paul, I don't think you're wrong in your observations. I think that the young vote was very dismotivated, if that's a word to use. I think that they got very excited a few years back when Barack Obama ran. They felt that he was a candidate that they could get behind. I think that they are, at a very tender age, pretty disgusted with what they see going on in Congress. I think that not only is there a disconnect between the voter and what they would like to see done and who they're voting for, but I think that what is going on in Congress is absolutely despicable. Everything that comes up is so factionalized and so split that we can't even decide, whether or not we can go have a glass of water at the break. And the political cartoons that are coming out these days are just taking everybody to task. And it's literally a dire threat as to how Barack Obama is going to finish up these last 2 years with everything that he suggests doing or tries to do. It gets into literally, hand-to-hand combat. I do think on the assisted suicide level that Brittany, a young lady out in Oregon, who had decided to take her life because she had a very, very difficult brain tumor called a glioma, which was not going to improve and was rapidly rendering her almost immobile due to continuous seizures. She had spoken the week before and said, this was before her husband's birthday, when they'd been married just about a year, and she said, well, maybe I will try and keep on living. But when it got to the day, November 1st, when she indicated originally that she would take her medication and do what she said she was going to do, she did it, not because she may not have wanted to push a few more days, but the seizures had reached a point where she was worried that she may not have been able to take her own medication, which may have then foiled her ability to do what she said she wanted to do and put others like her husband in a very uncompromising position of possibly having to give her medication and therefore being an active participant in taking her life, and that was not something that she wanted to see happen.
David, I'd love to see our audience come in onto our Facebook page at Caregiver Reality and give us your thoughts on these issues. Where do you stand on this, and what do you feel the right thing to do is? Similarly, you can get onto our website and give your opinions there, but you are an integral part of this discussion.
Right.
Love to hear from you.
And I think this issue has so many components to it. Not only is it cultural, ethnic, it has religious components, it has a lot of personal feeling, and the fact that people believe that if they have the right to live their life the way they would like to within the confines of the law, why can't, when medically they have a terminal or no-win situation, can they not elect to take their lives without having to go in the backyard and take out a gun and blow their brains out? Isn't there a better way of doing it? Can't we be a little more civilized, notwithstanding the Hippocratic Oath? I see from my producer we've got to go to a commercial, so we will see you in a new setting right after this commercial. Take it away, Freddie.
CFC support helps fund research. You can too. Each year, thousands of men and women serving their country in the U.S. military, as well as other employees of the federal government and the U.S. Postal Service, provide support for medical research to find treatments and cures for diseases. This is done through the combined federal campaign an annual workplace giving campaign that allows eligible individuals to support charities, such as those that conduct medical research, through a payroll deduction. Money donated this way to the medical research charities and its member organizations helps fund research to fight diseases from Alzheimer's to cancer, multiple sclerosis, blindness, breathing disorders, and much more. The diseases included afflict people of all ages, from the very young to the very old. You don't need to be a member of the military or a federal government employee to support research to help you or those you love that are suffering from an illness or disease. Donations to our not-for-profit tax-exempt organizations are tax-deductible and provide a vital source of funding in the fight to defeat some of life's most dreaded diseases. Please visit the website of the Medical Research Charities, which can be found at medicalresearchcharities.org. That's all one word, medicalresearchcharities.org. On that website, you can learn more about our member charities and make a donation in support of the research they're conducting for a specific disease or family of diseases. You can make a donation to Medical Research Charities itself and support the work of all our member charities. Please visit our website today, medicalresearchcharities.org. Become a part of Joining Forces to Find a Cure. Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse or loved one who can no longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one.
Hello, South Florida, America, and the world. This is David Levy, co-host on the Caregiver Reality Hour, and talking to you live from South Florida. We have a show that no one should miss because we're talking to 50 million caregivers in the United States and probably 100 million around the world. It's an opportunity to hear what the experts have to say, and more importantly, if you realize that the market for caregiving is as enormous as it is, you should get in touch with us because we're looking for certain select advertisers that want to be part of the Caregiver Reality. And those of you that want to be part of the Caregiver Reality family, get in touch with us, David at caregiverreality.com, Paul at caregiverreality.com. We'll get back to you because this is too important in your marketing to miss.
This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
And Mike is...
And we're back. And it's the Caregiver Reality Hour. And following that Medical Research Charities commercial, I just want to bring up a point that's extremely important. The Medical Research Charities organization tries to raise money through solicitation with the federal employee. I've told you that week after week. However, the federal employee cannot be responsible for carrying all the charitable organizations on their contributions and on their back. One of the things that's very unique about Medical Research Charities, one click to medicalresearchcharities.com allows you to make a donation to 29 charities. And that includes Alzheimer's, cancer, stroke, all different kinds of medical problems that need research, that need your support, that need your help. And look how convenient they've made it. One click to MRC and a donation goes to all those underlying charities. So if you've got somebody that has an issue, has a disease, has an affliction that you feel very strongly about, and you may have 2 or 3, something that happened to grandpa, something that happened to mom, something that may have happened to your sister, one donation gets you 29 charities supported. It's an incredible opportunity to do the right thing, and we only have about 7 weeks left for the end of the year to make some of those charitable contributions, even though, Paul, can't you make that charitable contribution right up until the time you do your income tax?
Has to be in a calendar year, David.
Just calendar year? Okay, very good. Anyway, medicalresearchcharities.org, and make your donation. They'll appreciate it, and so will everybody else that's a direct beneficiary.
Very appropriate with Thanksgiving right around the corner.
Right. And I was doing a little research a day or two ago, and I was reading about, just because Paul happened to put it in his perspective, end-of-life care. And they were talking about the fact, and very soon with our guests we may have a conversation related to this, was that many patients feel that doctors miss their priorities, that care preferences, prognosis, values, fears that are important to the ill and their family may be jumped over. And this was from November 3rd. Important points are often missed when doctors have end-of-life discussions with patients and their family, a new study finds. Researchers asked more than 200 older citizens who were hospitalized with serious illnesses and 205 of their family members about the importance of 11 recommended elements of end-of-life care. The patients and families said the top 5 end-of-life issues that should be discussed, and these are the 5 that not only did the patient but the family found important. Care preferences in the event of a life-threatening illness. Patient values, what's important to them as opposed to strictly what's important to the medical profession. Prognosis of illness and the doctor telling it like it is, even though it may not be the story best that he wants to tell. And I'm not using gender when I say he, it could be she, but it's up to the medical profession to tell us where we are medically. And I know some in the past have kept the full story so as not to scare or confuse people. However, the next one is fear and concern. And the fear and concern is that if you don't know what's really happening to you, how can you make an informed decision? How can your family know what to do? How do you know when you're ready to invoke those advanced directives and all of the things that you plan for? So part of it is clearly understanding your options, and that all players, whether it's hospice, whether it's the doctor, whether it's the facility, the family, everybody has to be candid, everybody has to be direct, because if not, we're not going to get the results that we hoped for, we're not going to get the results that we really wanted, and nobody is going to be happy with the outcome. And the last of those 5 were additional questions regarding care, and they constantly come up. I was with a client this afternoon, and their loved one has been in hospice for about the last week, and the time is drawing nigh. And even though they have a member of their family who's in the medical profession, they still had an abundance of questions. Thank gosh that hospice was there. They knew all the right things to answer, the right way to position the argument. And let me tell you, end of life, when you're in a hospice situation, is a team effort. And truly, one has to be grateful for everybody involved with doing the end of life scenario in a proper and professional and in a manner that we all can turn around and say, we did the best we could under a very difficult situation, and everybody can walk out proud that they did the best they could, even though they may have lost a loved one. And speaking of the medical profession, we have with us tonight Dr. Raja. Dr. Raja is the newest internal medicine physician to join Florida Healthcare Associates, with 2 practice locations here in Boynton Beach, Florida, which is just a couple towns up from Boca Raton, where we're broadcasting from. She finished her undergraduate education at Columbia University in New York, and then attended her state medical school, the what is that, UMD? Oh, okay, that's the University Medical in New Jersey, right?
University of Medicine and Dentistry of New Jersey in
Okay.
Newark.
Wasn't that used to be called downstate?
No.
No? Okay.
No.
Anyway, New Jersey Medical School in Newark, New Jersey. Dr. Raja completed her internal medicine residency training at the University of Miami at the Palm Beach Regional Campus. She also served as chief resident with the University of Miami Medical School. And so I'd like to greet her and turn this discussion over to Paul, who I know has been very anxious to ask Dr. Raja a number of questions.
Thank you, David, and welcome, Dr. Raja. We do appreciate you taking time from your busy practice to join us tonight. We're so many questions that we really would like to ask. I know that you're both board certified as an internist, but you're also a hospitalist as well, and I'm sure many of us either don't know or confused exactly what is it that a hospitalist does. Can you sort of explain your role to the audience, please?
Sure. A hospitalist is a physician that primarily takes care of patients in the hospital setting. So it would be somebody who would admit you to the hospital when you're acutely ill, take care of the patient during the hospital course, and do the discharge as well when the patient is ready to leave the hospital. And they're really important in preparing the patient for seeing their outpatient primary care physician and kind of helping with the transition of care that way. I'm a very unique kind of physician in that I work in both settings. I work in the hospitalist setting when I take care of our private practice patients in the hospital when they get sick, and I also take care of the patients in the outpatient setting as well. So, but one thing I wanted to really allay everyone's fears is that sometimes patients get very anxious when they go into the hospital setting and they don't see their primary care physician there. And I just want to reiterate that there's actually a great deal of communication that goes between the hospitalist and the primary care physician. We get written records about the hospital course, the discharge medications, if there's any labs that need to be followed up as an outpatient. And we definitely get written communication whenever patients are admitted or discharged from the hospital. So when you go into the hospital and you don't see your primary care physician there, don't feel as if you're out on your own or anything like that.
Thank you, Dr. Raja. It seems that hospital stays seem to be getting shorter and shorter, and along with that, patients seem to be coming home a little bit sicker along the way, and there seems to be a push to get the patient out of the hospital and back home. Obviously, your concern is that the patient improve and get better. How do you balance the two between the shorter stay and getting the patient home where they're going to have an opportunity to get better and thrive?
I think it's not that the hospital stays are getting shorter. I think they're getting more efficient. So when I work in the hospital and I take care of our private practice patients in the hospital, I work as a team with the administration and the ancillary staff and the other consultants that are on the case to try to get all the diagnostic imaging and all of the consultant evaluations done in a timely manner so that the patient doesn't have to stay another day or two in the hospital. It actually isn't a good thing to have a longer hospital stay because it can actually be detrimental to the patient's health. There's a lot of bacterial organisms that are floating around in a hospital, and patients can actually get sick if they stay too long. They can get urinary tract infections, pneumonia. So when your hospital setting time or when your hospital course is done, it's really much more beneficial to go to get discharged when you're feeling better and continue your care with your outpatient primary care physician.
So in this particular case, getting them out of that infectious potential is probably a good thing.
Yes, definitely. And the care, when you're admitted to the hospital with a certain diagnosis, like pneumonia or a urinary tract infection or whatever it is, the care doesn't end once you leave the hospital. I mean, it's important to follow up in a timely manner with your primary care physician or the other consultants you saw so that the care can just continue when you get out of the hospital. It doesn't end as soon as you get discharged.
Paul, could I ask a question of
Sure.
the doctor? Without being cynical about it, we now under Medicare have this rule that if you've been in the hospital for at least a couple of days and you get readmitted for the same condition or a complication of the same condition within 30 or 60 days, the hospital is penalized. And while I'm sure that the doctors and people such as yourself are very concerned that the patient not leave any sooner than they should and recognize the other side of what you just said about staying in the hospital too long, is there not a certain amount of motivation from the hospital, not necessarily the doctor, to get them out a little quicker and possibly sicker to avoid that penalty?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is an issue with a lot of the hospital administration and the Medicare reimbursements and all that. But I think again, some of that readmission that I've seen actually comes from the patient. Sometimes the patient actually is ill, and they do need to be hospitalized again. But a way that we can avoid that is again with good follow-up and timely follow-up communication with your outpatient physicians, so that you really know what you're supposed to be doing when you get out of the hospital, if there's any restrictions, what medications you're supposed to be on, or what medications you're supposed to stop. So I think it's sort of more of trying to, again, transition the care more to outpatient and make sure that you're working with your outpatient physicians on a timely manner.
Thank you. That's a good question, David. Appreciate it.
Well, I'm just trying to alert our caregivers, because those prescriptions getting filled and that regimen being followed is really what the informal family caregiver is primarily responsible. Those are the 724 eyes and ears in the house, and they know probably as much about the patient, both as a personal relationship, but also whether they don't look good, whether they're getting sicker. That's the person that knows first, and they're the front line.
And that's why we go typically when our wives go to the physician. We're with them to help explain what's going on, and those 24/7 eyes and ears have an opportunity to be used appropriately.
Couldn't agree with you more. Doctor? Go ahead.
Okay, Doctor, I wanted to ask you about these electronic medical records. This seems to be an issue that is in the process of being changed. I know some offices have made the switch over, some have not. Some of these medical records talk to other computers that have medical records. Others are still in the process of transitioning. Can you give us an understanding of why this is so important and where we really stand with this right now?
Yes, electronic medical records, I think, are a huge advancement in the healthcare industry. We have our own system in the office, and then there's a separate one in the hospital, and I actually can look at the hospital records in my office, which is really important, because when a patient comes from a hospital follow-up, I can see what's going on or what happened during the hospital stay. I think there is a push to get a universal electronic medical record so that all physicians within the country or a certain region can communicate with each other. But the way that I sort of do this to communicate with other physicians is sharing records, meaning, we have staff in our office that will obtain medical records from a physician if you see them out of state or out of the region. And then, I share my notes and my labs and all my results with those physicians as well if the patient, is traveling or whatever the situation may be. But definitely electronic medical records are a great advancement, because at least, I guess doctors are notorious for bad handwriting, and now we can actually see what everybody is really thinking, and that's really important. And a lot of times, actually, even beyond just sharing the medical records in the written word, I'll actually get on the phone with the physician too and speak with them to see what happened, either in the hospital if I'm not there, or at an office visit.
An extra safety net.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Paul. But have we kind of turned these electronic medical records into drop-down boxes? In the world of computer, it's what's there to select from, as opposed to the old-fashioned physician's notes where they could say exactly what they want, and not that there aren't certain fields in there that they can put free-form notes, but it seems to me we're regimenting these things to a point where it may say that may be technically correct, but it may be not exactly the way the doctor would have put it had they had the opportunity to write it out. You have a comment on that?
Yeah, I mean, as you said about the free texting, I actually do free text quite a bit in my notes, because that way, there's not everything that I want in the drop-down menus or in the templates. So, just for myself, when I try to track the follow-ups for a patient, I want to know what I discussed with the patient in the previous visit. So, I mean, I definitely, do free text quite a bit. Even other physicians that I've gotten notes from, they do full dictation, so that's in their own word, and it's not from a template. It's something that they dictate based on the interaction with the patient. So I think there are ways around it to try to deal with the fact that the template may be templated and just gives
Right.
yeah.
And there are so many different versions of them out there. I know that you have one for the hospital system, one
Yeah.
for your own practice. And as a consumer, I have doctors that are inside of 3 different hospital systems and 2 that also have their own notes. So trying to kind of correlate it is very, very difficult. You still have to print it out and compare it, as opposed to being able to do an online assessment of what all your doctors are saying at the same time, even if it's the same condition and you've been to various specialists. It can be very confusing and complicated.
Yeah, I mean, it can be, but it just basically, we get our records, if we get any photocopies or copies of electronic medical records from other physicians, they're sent to our office and they're scanned in immediately. So it's all right at my fingertips in my database when I'm actually, speaking with the physician during their office visit. So, and if something is missing, I definitely call for the records, and we have a specialized person in our office staff who actually deals with all the records, because it is really important to see what the other physicians are saying about the patient.
Thank you, Doctor. Timothy, from the doctor's position, when someone comes to your office for the first time, what is it that would be most helpful for you, for them to bring, or for them to know and to be able to communicate to you, as this is the first opportunity you have to actually meet the patient?
Sure, that's a really great question. Usually when a patient comes for a new visit, they want to establish care, or they heard about our practice, or they were referred by somebody. But to get the most out of the visit, really, I need to know a comprehensive medical history. So if they don't have the history or the records from their previous primary care physician in hard copy, I would really appreciate if they had their phone number or contact phone number of a previous primary care physician, and also let me know what specialists they're seeing in the area or even outside of the area, so that I can again obtain records and see what was done. Medication list, that is imperative. That way, even if I need to prescribe a medication during the first visit itself, and I do that occasionally, that way I can make sure that there's no drug interactions, and it's not going to make the patient feel ill. So those are the things really that I would want: medication list, list of all the physicians that they're seeing and their previous primary.
And flipping that around to the other side, what is it that you would like to see the patients ask you that sometimes, either through time or just confusion at the moment, they really don't ask, but they really should? Sure.
A lot of patients that I see, unfortunately, have a lot of chronic illnesses and are on various medications and just have a lot kind of going on health-wise. So when you come into the doctor, if you can really delineate what are the 1 or 2 symptoms or things that are really bothering you and really are at the top of your mind, and if you delineate that to me, that's really helpful. Is it that you're having difficulty taking your blood pressure medication because it's making you feel dizzy? Are you starting to leak urine in the last week? Whatever it is, if it's 1 or 2 top things that are really at top of mind, and you let me know, then I can really get, have a ground as to where to start from and get you the care in an expedient fashion.
So write it down and be prepared.
Right.
Yeah, writing down is a big thing. I actually do write down notes to give to patients at the end of a visit, especially if they have a lot going on and I want them to try things over the counter or change medication dosages, because a lot of times people don't really remember what happened at a doctor's visit, so I definitely try to give little cheat sheets if I can.
What's your attitude about having the family caregiver in with the patient?
I think it's the greatest. They give really imperative information, and actually 2 years are better than 1 too. So, a caregiver will actually ask me questions that the patient may not think of, and that way, I can really just be part of the whole collaboration and team in taking care of the patient, because the caregiver is the one who a lot of times administers the medications, monitors the patient's progress. So they're the ones actually that are going to give me a really, really good amount of information.
Dr. Raja, here in South Florida, in Florida in general, we see a lot of instances of cognitive impairment of one type or the other, and it goes across the ages, as you well know. When somebody's coming in, that obviously has to be a concern to you when you get the feeling that things aren't exactly as they should be. So why don't you give us a little bit of insight as to how you go about making those determinations?
Sure. Yeah, so cognitive impairment, the first thing I really look for is medication side effect. So that's why it's important for me to have an active medication list on hand in the record system. There are a lot of medications out there that can, if they started a new one or they increase the dose or something, like a sedative or a pain medication or even anti-seizure medications, can make a patient kind of change their mentation a little bit, be a little forgetful, be a little bit more sleepy, lethargic, whatever the case may be. So ruling out a medication side effect or an infection, an acute infection, that's kind of where I start with. Does the patient have a urinary tract infection? Do they have pneumonia? Because that can really affect your cognition as well. And then also during that visit, if I get a complaint that a family member or patient is saying that they're a little forgetful or they're getting lost or they're losing items around the house, I do what's called a mini mental status examination, and that may sound like a series of silly questions to the patient, but it actually helps assess a higher cognitive function. So spelling exercises, subtraction, interpretation of proverbs, that kind of thing, and that way I can get an idea of where the patient really stands.
Do you get pushback on that from the caregivers?
No, I haven't really so far. I think a lot of times the caregiver is very concerned about the family member is not remembering things, or turning this, even dangerous things like leaving the stove on, walking outside without supervision, that kind of thing. And most of the times these mild cognitive impairment doesn't start with really big things like forgetting family members' faces or things like what I just said, leaving the stove on or getting lost. It's really subtle things like forgetting why you walked into the kitchen, or leaving your keys somewhere. So sometimes the patient won't elicit that information. It's going to be the caregiver's going to tell me.
You're going to scare a lot of people about the fact that they can't find their car keys. We always say everybody at a certain point in time forgets where they put their car keys. It's when you forget how to drive. So, I don't want everybody stampeding.
No.
Not that they shouldn't go see you for a mini mental,
but it's basically changes. That's what I'm trying to say. It's not. Everybody loses their car keys, including me. But it's basically changes. It's usually subtle changes that are happening that the family member's concerned with, and they know better even than me, because they're living with the patient. So they're able to see, okay, well, this is how mom or dad was mentating last week, and all of a sudden there's a change. They're more sleepy, they're not as interactive, and that's when I would need to know about that, when there's a sudden change like that. So it's not, it's not just one thing or the other. They're not certain signs that particularly say that you have cognitive impairment. It's more of a change that needs to be evaluated.
And having that baseline has got to be a tremendous help as the patient returns a second, third, and fourth time along the way.
Yeah.
Do you find that from a caregiver perspective, it's one thing when you bring mom or grandma in to see you, when they bring a spouse in, because they're so close that they may not, or they may even be in denial of some of those subtle changes. So I guess at times the caregiver can be a good barometer, but at other times not wanting to kind of face the music or deal with the condition, they may run a little bit of interference on it as well.
Yeah, and sometimes you do get pushback on things like additional diagnostic testing or, certain lab tests or something like that. And, I don't really, unless it really, I obviously won't do anything that the patient or the caregiver is uncomfortable with doing. But, it's basically, that's how, it's sort of how I would work as a team with them to kind of explain to them about what's going on with their health care and speak with the caregiver and see how they, how aggressive they want to be with care. Because some families really don't want, invasive testing. They don't want, very aggressive caregiving. It really depends on, what the family and what the patient is really comfortable with doing. And so I make my suggestions and kind of work with them as to what they feel comfortable in doing and what my recommendations are.
And obviously, specialists are going to be an integral part of that equation.
Yes, definitely. And some patients don't want to be referred to a specialist. It really, so if I always give my suggestions and my recommendations and really give the risks and benefits about each one. So, I try to work with the families as a team to, help the patient get as healthy as possible.
That's an interesting comment about risks and benefits, especially as it relates to, quote, specialists. Obviously, and this is a question that I have, and I recognize you're a very skilled and a highly competent doctor, but as a general medicine or an internal medicine practitioner, are you always comfortable making a call when it comes to dementia? Or
No,
or would you prefer to also have the collaboration of a good neurologist on that call?
Yes, and that is exactly, that's absolutely true. What I usually do, and I think most internal medicine physicians will do, is do a mini mental status examination, examine what medications the patient is on, rule out any other reasons why the patient has a change in their mental status through labs or making sure they don't have an infection. And it is important for, especially if this is an ongoing thing, to be evaluated by a neurologist for full cognitive testing. That's a little bit more thorough than what I would do with a mini mental. So that definitely, I do work with several neurologists in the area regarding this, and it's definitely something that I really recommend. And I even feel comfortable starting dementia medications. I mean, that's not an issue, even titrating them and all of that. But the neurologist really would have the capability of doing a fuller cognitive testing evaluation than I do.
David, I think we have a break coming up.
Well, this is a brand new situation. I feel like, with all due respect, I feel like, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil, like three monkeys at the table, so to speak.
Oh, ouch.
Well, just that this is a very new situation for us, and look who just arrived. It's Freddie Jr., all right? Now, an IT executive in his own right. Welcome, my friend. But yes, we do have to go to a commercial in just a moment or two. I did want to point out, and I think, Doctor, you were very, very correct, not that I needed to call that out to you, in recognizing where a specialist's capability lies. So many people take it upon themselves, especially depending on the drug plans they're in, to go to a specialist before they've had a really good evaluation by their internal medicine person, because they think they know better. If my ear hurts, I'm going to the ENT guy, before I go to somebody like yourself and find out that all it was a little extra wax in my ear, and you could take care of it and also, make a better general overview than going to the specialist. How do you feel about that?
Yeah, that's definitely true. I mean, as an internist, I'd like to think we sort of try to, be the coordinator between all of the different aspects of a patient's health care. So, internists will be able to get a better overall picture of a patient's health and really be able to make the decision whether you would need a specialist, whether you would benefit from a specialist. And then also, we kind of are the person who holds all of the records, all of the medications from the different specialists. We communicate with them. So, definitely it's important to have an internist on board to help coordinate all of your care. And a lot of the times, actually, if you just seek out a specialist on your own and you don't have a primary, they'll recommend one for you because they would feel more comfortable with a patient being followed by a primary care physician as well.
I think that's a very valid point. I think everybody needs a quarterback, and then you need specialists from there. But somebody's got to have all that information in one place at the same time. And not be redundant. So I'm a big believer in that. Paul?
I guess forever we've been talking about wellness and talking about people stopping to stop smoking, and we talked about losing the weight and getting out and exercise and making sure they take the medicines every day. Non-compliant patients, I'm sure, got to be a real issue. Talk a little bit about that to our listeners, about those that are not following the advice that they're getting from their either primary or specialist.
Sure. The one thing that I do when I see a non-compliant patient is there's always a reason. So is it that they are not able to afford their medications? Are they not able to properly take their medications because they're confused about them? Are the medications giving them side effects? So this is when I like to call in the patient, or even speak with them on the phone if they miss an appointment, and that's part of the non-compliance, and figure out exactly what's going on. Why is it that they're not doing following the instructions by their physicians? Because there always is a reason. Sometimes patients actually they're just not capable of taking their meds or coming to their appointments, and this is where we get in other help, like home care agencies and enlisting the help of a caregiver, for example, and all of the other and other things as well. So the first thing is to really elicit the reason why a patient's not compliant and try to help them with that.
Can you address some community resources as being a help here also, with perhaps some of the reasons why they're not compliant?
Sure. Community resources are really important with things like exactly how you mentioned about the smoking and tobacco cessation. There are hotlines out there for smoking cessation. There are groups actually at the hospital where I work with and other community hospitals that help with smoking cessation, alcohol use and abuse, and even drug addiction and abuse. So there are definitely a lot of community resources out there that can help patients.
I think that's, I think the more we see an aging society with more and more chronic illness, I think that community-based resources are going to be at a premium, and that's one of the things that the community at large and organizations as well need to be very, very aware of, that those are going to be the backup for a lot of the care that people need, whether they're senior centers, whether they're specialized treatment centers, whatever it may be. Community-based resources are going to be part of the future safety net even more than they are today. Freddie, why don't we take our break, and we'll come back. We'll be back in just a minute or two. We're here in our new facility, trying to get used to doing it this way from the normal radio station perspective, so bear with us. You're listening to the Caregiver Reality Hour. You're watching us on caregiverreality.com, amp2.tv, and wwnnn1470.com as well, iHeartRadio. So wherever you are, hope you're enjoying the show, and bear with us as we deal with our new setting.
Are you a family caregiver? Are you taking care of a spouse
Okay, yeah,
or
that's
loved
2
one
minutes when you
who
get
can no
back.
longer take care of himself or herself? Are you dealing with Alzheimer's disease and don't know what to do? Do you feel burned out, frustrated, and just don't know where to turn? You've tried doctors, lawyers, and mental health professionals and have come to realize that they don't have practical answers to these questions. What you need are experts, non-clinical family caregivers with 25 years of active experience helping thousands of family caregivers like yourself. People who can help you provide a better quality of life for yourself and your loved one. Who you need are David Levy or Paul Vadiato. Reach David at david@caregiverreality.com or reach Paul at caregiverreality.com and let them help you pick the right path towards improving the quality of life for you, the caregiver, and your loved one.
This is Paul Vadiato, co-host of Caregiver Reality Hour. As a spousal caregiver, I know that sometimes things get rough and sometimes we lose perspective. David Levy and I have over 50 years experience and expertise on advising caregivers. If you find that you need help, you're a little confused, reach out to us at Paul or David at caregiverreality.com. We're there to help.
This is Caregiver Reality with gerontologist David Levy and caregiver expert Paul Vadiato, who ask you to call in and speak with him on the air toll-free at 888-565-1470. That's 888-565-1470 to share a story or important information. Now, back to today's Caregiver Reality Show.
Dr. Raja, we're just finishing up. The hour seems to have flown by. Any last thoughts, and how can people contact you? Where is your office located? Do you have a website?
Sure. So my last thoughts are really to really say thank you to all the caregivers out there, because I really think that they're an imperative part in the healthcare that we give to our patients and I give to my patients in our practice. And again, I have 2 office locations in Boynton Beach, Florida. One is on South Jog Road and one is on North Federal Highway, and I can be reached by phone at either of those office locations. The phone numbers are 561-736-8600 or 561-733-9690. And our practice name is Florida Healthcare Associates.
Is there a website?
No, we don't have a website.
Okay.
Well, Doctor, I want to thank you very much. You've had a lot of insight, and you've answered some of the questions that a lot of our audience out there has been asking themselves. A really good general practitioner in internal medicine is the quarterback that we all need for good care. We have about a minute left. I want to thank our audience for being as attentive as they have and for bearing with us. This new setting is going to be dynamic. But we're all getting a little bit used to it right now, and so if we looked a little frozen in the headlights, please bear with us. And to South Florida, America, and the world, have a great evening. And Paul?
Thank you, caregivers, for joining us today. Have a great week, and caregivers, take care of yourselves. Good night.
Thanks for joining us for this week's Caregiver reality show. Each week, David Levy, a gerontologist, and Paul Vadiato, a caregiver expert with a combined over 25 years of experience, providing practical and realistic help to caregivers struggling to keep up with the needs of a loved one who are unable to care for himself or herself. To reach David Levy, email him at david@caregiverreality.com, or to reach Paul Vadiato, email paul@caregiverreality.com. And find out more online. Just go to caregiverreality.com. See you next week for another exciting show of Caregiver Reality. The opinions expressed on the preceding sponsored program were strictly those of its hosts, guests, and callers, and not necessarily those of this station, its staff, management, or sponsors.